Okay, thank you. And I adjourn the meeting now. But I want to also just say a few words more that I want to announce that the HIREC dues, HIREC board has approved their discounting of your 2021 dues by 50%. So you can now renew your HIREC dues for $30 rather than $60. And Krista will put the link to renew your dues in the chat box. If you're not a member yet, please consider joining us. We're a globally minded organization that provides information that will help you in your business across the borders. Okay, Leonard, can you please introduce our speaker, Ralph Cossa? Thank you.
Thank you, Brennan. I guess a lot of you may have already had the pleasure of listening to Ralph. He's been with us, I know, at least once, if not more than one time, and he's been with us in person. And in this time, I guess I can't think of a better person to be with us to help explain some of the things that are going on. Ralph is, he sits on the board of numerous foreign relations organizations throughout the Asia Pacific region. As a recognized expert on U.S. Asia Pacific foreign relations and policy, Mr. Cossa joins conferences for political, economic, military, and business leaders in countries around the world. Again, he's been with us before, and I can't think of a better guy to be here today to help us better understand the world we're currently living in. Please join me in welcoming Ralph Cossa.
Well, Leonard, thank you very much. I appreciate this opportunity. I think this is my third or fourth time speaking to the group. Patrick O'Neill told me I had to keep coming back until I got it right. So we'll see if I get a little closer this time than previously. A couple of words of commercial before we start. I'm with the Pacific Forum. I was president there for 25 years. I'm now sort of a president emeritus, which means I'm old. The Pacific Forum is a nonpartisan foreign policy research institute. It was founded by Admiral Joe Vasey, who some of you may know or at least know of, back in 1975. And Joe was active in giving us guidance until he passed away at 101 years old about 2 years ago. But he was a submarine skipper during World War II and said, if I live through this, I'm going to find a better way of solving problems other than people dropping bombs on one another. Fortunately, obviously, he did live through it, and he founded the Pacific Forum in 1975. And we're still trying to find a better way, if you will, of getting people to deal with problems. We're nonpartisan. We're an equal opportunity critic. I found lots of things that I thought Obama did wrong. I've even found a couple of things that I think Mr. Trump did right. I'm sure that if things prevail and Mr. Biden becomes the new president, as it seems to be, I'll have an opportunity to criticize him as well. But we try to be fair in pointing out both the pluses and the minuses in foreign policy. At the end of the day, substance matters. I sometimes described Mr. Trump's Asia policy as something like Wagner's music. It was better than it sounds. The policies, in many cases, certainly the stated policies have been pretty solid, although style also matters. And I'm not here to compliment President Trump's bedside manner, particularly in dealing with China, but his diagnosis has been actually fairly correct. And I'll talk about that more in a few minutes. I thought I would start off by answering the two questions that were posed in the description of this talk, and the answers are yes and no. Yes, we are headed for a new Cold War with China, although academics will spend the next 4 years debating whether or not we should call it a Cold War. But regardless of what you brand it, we're in for a prolonged period of confrontation and challenges with China, regardless of who ends up in the White House next January. And no, we are not on the verge of a hot war with North Korea, although North Korea is likely to do something here in the next couple of months between now and Inauguration Day to remind us that they're still around. North Koreans don't mind being hated, but they hate to be ignored. So in all likelihood, we'll see them do something which the press will immediately brand as a crisis, quote unquote, but which will just be sort of them venting a little bit to remind us that they're still around. I want to focus primarily on China, but I'll start with a few words on North Korea, and then I'll end with a few words about the pandemic and how that's impacting our security interests, and of course, how it's impacting us here in Hawaii. Those of you who have heard me talk before know that I always start off any discussion with North Korea by saying, when it comes to North Korea, we're all guessing. I've been guessing for over 50 years now and trying to figure out what the North Koreans are doing. Others have not been guessing for quite so long, but we're all guessing. It's a pretty opaque society. What I can tell you for certainty is that the leadership in North Korea, either previously or today, are not crazy. They're crazy as a fox. They have managed to play a very poor hand extremely well, and managed to play US against China, South Korea against itself. They bring the Russians in just for fun, and that's sort of the way it's been. Now, in the last 4 years, we've gone from pretending that we were on the brink of war, we weren't, to pretending that we were on the brink of denuclearization, which we certainly weren't, to now going back to where we were before, which is just trying to muddle through and pretend that everything is okay. The Obama administration called that strategic patience. The Trump administration called it maximum pressure. In each case, we were sort of hoping that we could put enough pressure on North Korea economically and politically that they would cry uncle. So far, it hasn't worked. It's not likely to work. We all saw what happened to Kim's uncle, so that's probably not even a good analogy. But as long as the Russians and particularly the Chinese are intent on keeping North Korea on life support, the North Koreans are not going to collapse and they're not going to give in, and we're going to just have to manage the problem. But it is a problem. It's not something we're on the brink of war. I'm happy in our Q&A session to go into a lot more detail on North Korea. I could talk about it for hours, but right now I think the bigger challenge is China. And it's a challenge that is not Donald Trump's fault. It is not Barack Obama's fault. It is Xi Jinping's fault, the president of China. When Obama first came in, he developed a strategy of trying to reach out to China. It was the right strategy for the wrong China. It was the right strategy if Deng Xiaoping had still been alive, or if Deng Xiaoping thought was still sort of guiding where China was going. Unfortunately, Xi Jinping has taken China in a new direction. He has undermined almost everything that Deng stood for. And instead, he has seen, since the economic crisis of a number of years ago, a belief that China was on the rise and America was on decline. And it was time to take advantage of that, to no longer hide your strength and bide your time, which was the dictum under Deng Xiaoping, and instead to sort of speak loudly and carry a big stick, which is what the Chinese have done for the last 4 or 5 years. It took Obama a little too long, I think, to adjust to that. He finally did. Trump came in understanding the right China, understanding that China was going to be a competitor, and started out, quite frankly, with the right policy. It was a policy that focused on reciprocity, on leveling the playing field. And then Mike Pompeo became Secretary of State. Pompeo believes that it's not Chinese behavior that's the problem, it's Chinese ideology. So for the last year or so, we've been criticizing not Chinese behavior, but the Chinese Communist Party as the problem. And this essentially tells China, if they want to get along with the United States, they have to change their political system. And since that's the source of Xi's legitimacy, they're not very likely to do that. So as a result, we're not going to see anything improved with US relations with China. Now, assuming, and I will assume for these comments, that Mr. Biden will be elected and will be sworn in January. Who knows what's going to happen between now and January? I think there could be some mischief, but let's say we're where we are today. When January arrives, I think that we will probably downplay the ideology standpoint, but we will still take a much stronger view toward China. China policy used to be cooperate whenever and wherever we can and confront or challenge if and when necessary. It's now changed to confront and challenge whenever necessary and cooperate if and when we can. It's still the same two ingredients, but obviously the emphasis is now more on confronting and challenging than it is on cooperation. And again, as I mentioned, I think the main reason for that has not been a change in US desires, but a change in Chinese behavior. So that's why I think we're in for a long struggle, even if things may get back on track a little bit, and we'll at least have a foreign policy that's A, a little more predictable, and B, is aimed also at respecting our allies. We're going to have to build a coalition in order to deal with China. Now, the Trump administration has been frequently accused of being unilateralist, but I think it's very important to note that Secretary Pompeo, even though he canceled his trip to Asia a couple of weeks ago after COVID broke out in the White House and elsewhere, he still flew to Japan to meet the so-called Quad ministers. The Quad being an informal gathering, not an alliance, an informal gathering of like-minded states, those four states being the United States, Japan, Australia, and India. In the past, both Australia and India had been very hesitant to sign up for anything that might have been seen as an attempt to contain China. What the Chinese have done in the last year, of course, is to try to interfere politically in Australia as they try to do in the United States. They've just, by the way, banned Australian wine in China. So that tells you how serious they are about trying to put pressure on the Australians. The Australians don't particularly appreciate that. And of course, the Chinese had some military confrontations along the contested border area with India. As a result, thanks to Chinese behavior, the Indians and the Australians are now much more prepared to sign up with the United States and with Japan, which has known for a long time that China is the problem and they need to have help in order to confront it. We're even now talking about a Quad plus, and the plus so far has been New Zealand, South Korea, and believe it or not, Vietnam. Secretary Pompeo has now started calling this a concert of democracies. That's not a particularly good term since that may disqualify Vietnam. He's also talked in some cases about creating an Asian NATO, and nothing will kill the opportunity for cooperation more than to call it an Asian NATO. So we haven't gotten the terminology right, but I think we've gotten the policy right, which is to try to build a coalition of countries, not specifically against China, but for the rule of law, for freedom of navigation, for human rights. And these are all things, of course, that the Chinese think are aimed at them. And the correct answer to China when they say that is, if the shoe fits, wear it. Because in fact, again, it's aimed at Chinese behavior, not Chinese ideology. In the meantime, what we've seen in the last couple of years has been a lot of stress on our alliances with Australia, but particularly with Japan and most importantly with South Korea. I think this will change. We'll see things going a little bit smoother with the new administration. Again, bedside manner matters, and I think that we'll see sort of a kinder, gentler approach to our allies. This will be the case, I think, in Europe with NATO as well. Again, I want to leave maximum time for Q&A since I'm more interested in hearing your questions. So let me just say a few words about the pandemic and its impact, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. First of all, let me say that I've been on the mainland for the last several months, and we came back into Hawaii 2 days ago. A few weeks ago, we signed up for the Safe Travels Hawaii thing. We uploaded our itinerary and our photo. I got up at 3 o'clock in the morning to get online to register for a CVS test in the one drugstore in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where we were, that was giving those tests. I got the test on the 2nd. They said you could wait 2 to 5 days for a response, but 46 hours later, my wife and I both got our negative responses. We updated them. We did the questionnaire that's on the Safe Hawaii. And when we got off the plane, there were a whole bunch of tables set up. We went to one of the tables. The guy, we showed him our little code. He looked us up in the computer. We showed him the negative test, and he said, "Welcome home, have a nice evening." And it was as simple as that and as efficient as that. Now, I've heard people who have come in 2 or 3 weeks ago when it first started saying they had nightmares, but I tip my hat to the state. They've gotten it right, and it was pretty painless for us to come home. So for those of you who are thinking about traveling or recommending people to travel, if you just follow the procedures, which starts off with signing up for that safe travel with Hawaii, I think you'll find that it's a pretty painless thing. Now at Pacific Forum, for those of you who are members of our group, you already know that we've done a series of 7 meetings earlier this year where we had spokespersons from 7 different countries in the Asia Pacific, well, 6 plus a US spokesman, talking about how each of their countries has dealt with COVID. First, no brainer, wear a mask. We did our walk around Diamond Head this morning. I was encouraged to see that most of the people who walked by were wearing masks, not everyone, but most. I was discouraged that only 2 out of about 40 runners that ran past us within 2 feet were wearing a mask. This isn't rocket science. Wear a mask if you go outside or if you go indoors anywhere. Protect me, us old guys, but protect yourself as well. The other thing, the lesson in South Korea, is the South Koreans initially botched it, but they turned it around. They started contact tracing, very serious program of contact tracing using your electronics in your phones, since everyone in Korea has at least 2 phones at all times. And they got it under control. Taiwan started early with its problems because they had lived through SARS. They understood the challenge. They were reading Chinese and knew what was going on in China even before the Chinese acknowledged it. And Taiwan has had, I forget the numbers right now. I think it's 200 days, but it's certainly been several months where there hasn't been a locally transmitted case. Again, contact tracing, their phone talks to your phone and tells you if you've been near anyone who subsequently had the disease. I'm not sure how we're doing here in Hawaii on contact tracing. I understand it's not that great. That's certainly somewhere where we have to put a little bit more emphasis. Japan has kept things fairly well under control. Again, if you went into Japan on a normal year during the flu season, 90% of the people would be wearing masks on the subway and everywhere else. They understand that if you don't want to catch something from someone else, you wear a mask during the right season. And right now is the season to be wearing masks. Again, contact tracing is important. We heard the same story from Singapore, from New Zealand, and everywhere else. As a result, I think the countries in Asia are recuperating and getting back to, quote, normal, I think much faster than the United States is. Meanwhile, and again, this is not a partisan statement, I think it's just a statement of fact, The US has not handled it well. And as a result, this has probably hurt the US image abroad more than any other single event, including Donald Trump's insults to various foreign leaders. Just based on the fact that in all previous crises America has led, we've set the example that others have followed. And here we are just not doing that with COVID. And quite frankly, as an American, I'm embarrassed by it. I think that we're probably still in for a long haul. I'm hoping to see that we'll find ways to open up. I know there are many friends in Japan who are waiting for the opportunity to start traveling to Hawaii under the same rules that I had to follow to come back from New York and New Mexico. So we're going to see how that plays itself out. In the meantime, obviously, even those countries that have done extremely well in dealing with it are talking about 0 to 1 or 2% growth this year. But they will be back, and I think we will be back. And in the meantime, if I haven't mentioned this, wear a mask, please, particularly if you're outside, and particularly if you're walking around Diamond Head, since you'll run into me in my morning walks. So Leonard, why don't I stop there, and let's just open it up for Q&A rather than just listening to me talk.
Hi, Ralph. We have a question from Patrick O'Neill, and he asked if you could please provide your insights into the situation in Hong Kong and the possible outcomes.
Great. Well, thank you, Patrick. I knew that you'd be particularly interested in that. We just did a roundtable at Pacific Forum a week ago with Kurt Tong. Kurt was our consul general in Hong Kong until he retired from the Foreign Service about 1.5 years ago. He was also one of the people the Chinese personally blamed for instigating all of the trouble in Hong Kong. The Chinese, of course, never look in the mirror and say, whoops, we may have caused the problem. So they have to find someone else to blame. And if you can find an American to blame, that's your first option in China. So Kurt was one of the ones that was to blame. I found his comments interesting. And again, a few of you may have been in on that call. But he has been somewhat critical of the US response, which has been essentially to remove Hong Kong from our sort of first most favored nation status because of because they don't have the autonomy that they used to. So we had the right to do that, but whether it was the right thing or not, I think Kurt and several others have pointed out was probably not a great idea. Now, the problem really came down again to Xi Jinping's impatience. China cut a deal with the Brits when they got Hong Kong back. And that was for a 50-year period where Hong Kong would be able to essentially self-govern everything but foreign policy. And that allowed Hong Kong to continue to have legislative freedom and the right of final adjudication in legal matters. And this is written into the agreement, an agreement which was signed by both the leader of China and the leader of the UK and registered at the UN. There is no question that China is violating that agreement. This new special measures law, which essentially now says if you say something in Hong Kong that the Chinese don't like, they can arrest you and bring you to China for trial. This is completely contrary. The Chinese, of course, are saying, well, you know, too bad, we're going to do what we want. We're the big kid on the block. And I think we need to find ways, the US and in particular the UK and Europe needs to find ways to hold China accountable for it. Right now, I know Patrick has business in Hong Kong. Patrick, I would delay going back to visit relatives or friends there for another couple of months until things settle down. Literally, you as an American citizen, if you went out on the street and protested Chinese behavior, could be arrested. particularly as an American, you just play into their confirmation that this is all foreign instigation. It's the Patrick O'Neills that are now the problem now that Kurt Tong has retired, I guess. So I would be very careful as an American, and I would certainly be very careful as a pro-democracy advocate in Hong Kong about how you speak at the present time. In the meantime, I think that we need to have a much more concerted, multi-dimensional effort globally, not just the United States and not just Asia, but global, putting pressure on the Chinese, not just for Hong Kong, but also for the South China Sea, also for human rights issues and everything else. Now, again, many of you who have heard me speak know that I'm in the let's engage with China. I don't think we need to be trying to, quote, contain China. We certainly don't need to be undermining the Chinese Communist Party. That's up to the people of China to do. If they want to do it, we should find ways to help them, but that shouldn't be our policy. Our policy should be to hold China accountable to those things that China has already promised to do. And one of those was to respect Hong Kong autonomy and the right of final adjudication and the right to choose its own leaders for another 30 years or so. And that to me is where the problem is. Now, Patrick, I'm not sure I answered all of your question, but I know I talked for a long time on it. So let me stop and see if there was a follow-up.
Actually, there was a second question from Patrick, and he asked, is a China takeover or a simulation of Taiwan possible in any scenario?
I think one of the biggest mistakes that we make as Americans, or certainly the media, this probably sells a lot of newspapers and gets a lot of people excited, but somehow or other, the Chinese law vis-a-vis Taiwan is an indication that China is about to invade Taiwan maybe next Tuesday or certainly in the next couple of months. I don't think anything could be further from the truth. First of all, the Chinese are not capable of invading Taiwan and capturing it and seizing it and holding it. They could drop a lot of bombs on Taiwan and create a lot of problems and destroy China's economy in the meantime. But while I don't think Xi Jinping is a genius, I don't think he's stupid either. And I don't see that happening. The Chinese have said, have two big dates in mind. One is 2021 and the other is 2049. By 2021, they're supposed to be a rich, prosperous country. And by 2049, they are supposed to essentially have righted all of the wrongs of history. So the Taiwan falls into the 2049 category, not the 2021 category, as far as Xi Jinping's own timetable is at it. Now, this doesn't mean that Taiwan should declare independence tomorrow and see whether or not China would react. They'd be forced to react. But other than that, China continues to play the long game with Taiwan in hopes, right now, not so much that somehow or other public opinion in Taiwan will change and everyone will be yearning to join the mainland, but at least as the current DPP government is doing and as the KMT prior government certainly did, not doing anything that would tear away the fig leaf of one China. And that's all it is, obviously, is a fig leaf. But there can be a lot of embarrassment if a fig leaf is removed. So this is something that both sides have to continue to say that they are the rightful recipient of the title China and just agree to disagree on the definition of one China and continue to go about their merry way. In the meantime, I think the US needs to be more forthcoming in demonstrating our support for China. I think sending the Health and Human Services Secretary, the first cabinet minister, I think, ever to visit Taiwan since the break in diplomatic relations, was the right move and sends a clear signal to China that we're serious, that we are not going to abandon Taiwan, even though we're not going to encourage Taiwan to do anything foolish. And we're not going to stand by idly and allow China to do anything foolish either.
sorry, a bunch of questions popped up with that. It's Patrick asked Ralph, in case Xi Jinping is listening to our Zoom meeting today, please clarify that I am not a leader in the democracy movement in Hong Kong.
I'm sorry, could you
No,
repeat that again?
Yes, it's Patrick said, Ralph, in case Xi Jinping is listening to our Zoom meeting today,
Yeah.
please clarify that I am not a leader in the democracy movement in Hong Kong.
Well, Patrick, you know, the reality is Xi Jinping would expect you to deny it, but he would certainly give you a fair trial before pronouncing you guilty and putting you away for the next 10 years. So, but I'll pass that message along, since I'm sure that he's listening and listens to me.
Okay, we have a question from Audrey Lee. She had asked if you could restate what kind of behavior this was. This is what the quote was. The aim of the coalition was stated as a rule of law, freedom of navigation, and blank behavior. She was asking what kind of behavior this was.
No, I said that our policy toward China needs to be aimed at Chinese behavior rather than Chinese ideology. So we should be promoting the rule of law, we should be promoting freedom of navigation, and we should be promoting human rights. And to the extent that Chinese behavior does not undermine those, does not choose to undermine those in other countries in particular, then I think we need to find ways of dealing with China. To the extent that Chinese aggressive behavior, which is what we've seen here recently toward India, toward Australia politically, and toward the South China Sea in both military terms and in political terms, to the extent that that kind of aggressive behavior continues, we need to take a strong stand and hold China accountable.
Okay, we also have another question from George. He asked, how do you see a new Prime Minister Suga in Japan? His policy toward China, Japan, South Korea, North Korea, and USA?
Good, very, very good question. I mean, I certainly don't think that Mr. Suga is going to be around as long as Mr. Abe was. In some respects, he's sort of a caretaker until the next generation of LDP leaders rises to the top. I would incidentally watch Junichiro Koizumi, the former prime minister's son, who used to be a Pacific Forum Young Leader, our program where we try to bring the best and brightest from different countries to our meetings. I think ultimately we're going to see the next generation come in. Until then, I think Suga is going to, for the most part, perpetuate and continue the Abe policies that he helped to formulate and promote. And first and foremost of that will be to maintain a strong alliance with the United States. A very highly respected colleague once said in an off-the-record meeting, so I can't repeat his name, but he said, whoever is the Prime Minister of Japan, his new best friend will be the President of the United States. And whoever the President of the United States is, his new best friend or her new best friend will be the Prime Minister of Japan. This is driven by our national interests, and that is likely to continue. My biggest disappointment with Japan has not been it's trying to tread carefully with China, because obviously they live next door to China, and they are going to try to not do anything that inflames them, even while standing up when they have to. It has been the, quite frankly, abysmal relationship between Japan and South Korea, America's two important allies. I give the lion's share of the blame, incidentally, to the South Korean leadership, to President Moon, but it takes two to tango, or to tangle, in this case, to tangle. And Japan has not been very good at turning the other cheek. Now, I know the Japanese have sort of gotten tired of turning the other cheek and having it slapped with the South Koreans, but at some point we need to have more inspired leadership, both in Seoul and in Tokyo, to remind them that there are bigger problems out there in the world, problems that the two of them share, and they need to sort of put World War II behind them and get on with the Japan of today and not the Japan of 1949 or 45, which is long gone.
Okay, we don't have any other questions at the moment.
Okay, well, with that, then I'm going to go ahead and get this all closed up. Thank you so much, Ralph, for coming today and sharing. I know you just got off the airplane, so thank you so much for spending this time with us. And a big thank you to our sponsor, Guaranteed Rate, Leonard Loventhal. I want to tell everyone to have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Stay safe and healthy and have a wonderful weekend. Mahalo and have a great day.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you.
Let me just end by saying www.pacforum.org if you're interested in being on our mailing list.
Awesome. So can you repeat that, Ralph?
Yeah, just www.pacforum, PACFORUM.org. And you can go to our website and you can sign up for our various products for free. And of course, if you also want to donate, you can do that. That's always welcome. We're a nonprofit. But all of our publications are available for anyone who wants them.
Yeah, and it's really good, timely information. And they also include you in invites to various webinars as well. So thank you so much. All right, everyone, you have a wonderful day.
Okay, bye-bye.